is it time to start worrying about Todd Gurley in 2019 and beyond? I'd say it maybe isn't time to get too worried, but it's time to have the conversation of, is it possible that he drops off a year from now? I know he's still a young player. If you take a look at Todd Gurley's stat line, you can see that he's had quite a number of years in a row being excessively overused. Very, very active in the passing game. So he's taken a lot of hits. And not last year, but the year before, he took some abuse that a lot of running backs probably wouldn't have been able to endure. He had hit 8-man fronts constantly, couldn't get anything going in 2016. He had 885 yards on his 278 attempts. That's 3.2 yards per carry. He had a really bad year. And if you remember back, this is the year that people thought, oh, Todd Gurley's no longer a running back one. He was that big of a bust in 2016. Then he had a big year in 2017, his bounce back year where he had 13 touchdowns and 1,300 yards rushing. And then, of course, the monster year this year with 17 touchdowns and 1,251 on the ground. But he missed some games at the tail end of the season. He didn't look particularly good during the playoffs. Is he declining? Now, before you jump to conclusions and say, how can Todd Gurley break down after 4 years? That's insane. Let's take a look at a few running backs. One in particular, Shaun Alexander, who, if you kind of discard his rookie year where he had 1,300 rushing yards and only 64 attempts, he had 5 elite seasons. The fifth one, where he rushed for 27 touchdowns with 1,800 rushing yards, probably one of the best seasons in fantasy football history, was a consistent top 3 overall pick for this string of years. After 5 elite seasons, he fell off the map with 896 yards after his 5th season where he was a monster, 716 yards after that, and then 24 yards after that. He could not play full seasons. He was broken down after 5 brutal seasons of being overworked. Take Larry Johnson as another example. If you didn't play fantasy football in 2005 and 2006, then you may not remember how awesome Larry Johnson was. He sat behind Priest Holmes for a little bit, and when he finally got a shot in his 3rd year, he had 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns. The next year after that, 17 rushing touchdowns and 1,789 on the ground. He had 336 attempts in that 2005 year, his 3rd year, and 416 attempts in 2006. Now, granted, those carry totals, those attempts are a bit higher than Todd Gurley's. But after back-to-back 300, and one of them being a 400 carry season, Larry Johnson fell apart. He had 2 great years and then fell off the map. If we take the guy that played ahead of him in Kansas City, Priest Holmes, you'll see that in Baltimore he had a good rookie season. Then he was injured. When he finally landed in Kansas City to finally be unleashed as the number 1 running back. Now, Priest Holmes is a little bit different because he's more of a Marshall Faulk type player. He had, 600-yard seasons with 2 and 3 receiving touchdowns to go along with his rushing totals. But if you look at his monster elite years, he had 3 of them. 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns, 1,600 yards and 21 touchdowns, 1,400 yards and 27 touchdowns. There probably is no greater fantasy football running back, in my mind, than Priest Holmes during 2001, 2002, and 2003. Then he fell off the map. Now, it's a bit tough to correlate Todd Gurley's career trajectory with these guys because in many of these cases, like Priest Holmes not playing in 97, 99, and really not getting his shot until 2001, it's hard to say was his body, breaking down based on his age. Is Todd Gurley, because he's younger, going to hold up more? But I think my point here in showing you these running backs compared to Todd Gurley is that 4 years of a heavy workload, especially when one of those years, in Todd Gurley's case, in 2016, was a massively hard undertaking where he averaged 3.2 yards per carry because he was getting stuffed at the line and getting smashed at the line and not being able to get a darn yard of wiggle room. The guy has been abused. And my point here isn't that he is a for sure bust. He's still in my top 3 as of this moment. I am not predicting that he is a for sure bust in 2019. But we should start having the conversation of whether he is a safe top 3 overall pick, especially in Dynasty, given the workload that has been shoveled down his throat, and given the kind of workload and the kind of brutal season he had in 2016. Thank goodness he doesn't have any 300 carry seasons. If he had, let's say, 320 carries last year, I would be telling you to avoid him probably at all costs heading into next year, because of the history of running backs hitting those kinds of numbers and then dropping off the face of the earth. He has been under 300 carries per season. That's what gives me hope that he can endure a couple more years at this workload and usage without declining. But given that he kind of vanished at the end of 2018, given that he didn't look particularly amazing in the playoffs, it's time to have the conversation around this topic. Is Todd Gurley a risk at top 3 value moving forward? Comment below, subscribe. Let's get the debate going on this topic.